Order. Question number 4, Honourable David Cunliffe.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. To the Prime Minister, does he stand by a statement that corporate manslaughter legislation was off the table?
Right, Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, in a word, no. I did not use that phrase, off the table. What I actually said was I had some discussions with the Attorney-General about it, and the last discussion I had certainly didn't indicate that that was where we were likely to go.
Speaker.
Supplementary question, Honourable David Cunliffe.
Mr Speaker, is the Prime Minister now hedging on this matter because his Justice Minister Judith Collins has said she's still awaiting advice and investigating?
Right, Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, no. What is true is the Minister of Justice officials have been looking at the issue of corporate manslaughter, but the Minister of Justice advises me that there have been very few successful prosecutions. What I'm also aware of is that the changes that we are actually making in relation to workplace safety legislation means that they will include harsher penalties and specific duties on directors relating to health and safety, including prison in some extreme cases. So it's unlikely that corporate manslaughter would be necessary.
All right.
Supplementary question, the Honourable David Cunliffe.
Given that 3/4 of New Zealanders poll favour the criminalisation of corporate manslaughter, isn't his reluctance to move forward based on one set of rules for his corporate mates and another for people who get killed in mining and forestry?
Right, Honourable Prime Minister.
Well, Mr Speaker, if the member is...
Order. I apologise. We have a point of order from Tracy Martin.
Offence to the word tosser being used inside Parliament by the Honourable Tohanare.
Well, order. I didn't hear the interjection, but if the member's taken offence at that interjection, I asked Tohanare, did he interject with that word, and if so, could he withdraw?
I apologise. Withdraw and apologise.
Thank you. Well, I think, to be fair to the member, we'll have the question again.
Thank you, Mr Speaker. Given that 3/4 of New Zealanders polled want to see corporate manslaughter criminalised, isn't this just another example of the Prime Minister looking after his big business mates while ordinary Kiwis get killed and maimed in mines and in forests?
Right, Honourable Prime Minister.
So I don't think the member actually listened to my answer. The reason why the government doesn't believe it's necessary is because it's already making those changes in the proposed legislation.
Supplementary question, Honourable David Cunliffe.
Mr Speaker, does he agree with Hancock Forest Management, who says that a forestry safety system is broken?
Right, Honourable Prime Minister.
Well, Mr Speaker, I don't necessarily agree with that statement. What I do agree with is that this is an industry that needs significant change. I will say that the tragedies that have taken place in the forestry sector are running at roughly a rate very similar to when the member was a minister under the Clark government. But what is certainly true is that there's a need for change, and this government is embracing that change, including putting $30 million into the new WorkSafe New Zealand, including undertaking an audit of all of the forestry firms that are out there at the moment, including writing to the forestry owners and lifting the overall performance. Mr Speaker, everyone agrees that 9 deaths is 9 too many, but this has been a long-standing problem in the forestry industry.
Speaker.
Supplementary question, the Honourable David Cunliffe.
Given that on his watch there have been 90 serious injuries and 30 deaths in the forestry industry, much more than under Labor, why does he then think that, quote, writing to forest owners is in any way sufficient?
Right, Honourable Prime Minister.
Well, Mr Speaker, firstly I'd have to check the member's facts because we know that's often not the case. But Mr Speaker, what I can say is the government recognises that there is a need to improve health and safety, and these are changes to a sector that's been operating for a very long time under existing rules. This government is doing something about it. Quite sadly, the member was part of a government that did nothing about it.
Speaker.
Honourable David Cunliffe.
Mr Speaker, how exactly does the Prime Minister plan to make the forestry industry safer when he's ruled out an inquiry and now corporate manslaughter charges? Or is it just the fact that Mr Bridges says yeah, he says nah, and Mrs Collins says maybe?
Right, Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, that sounds more like a David Cunliffe speech, actually. But anyway, stepping back to one side, Mr Speaker, the member needs to go and look at what the government's actually doing. This is a serious area, and the government has a serious response, which included an independent task force. And I might say, if you look at what the independent task force on health and safety came out with, it made it clear it didn't think corporate manslaughter should be progressed. What the government is progressing is much tougher rules in the new workplace safety legislation that will be introduced next year, which will include duties and specific responsibilities on directors that can include a term of imprisonment. Mr Speaker, we are also putting a huge amount of money into WorkSafe New Zealand. We're out there working with every business in the forestry sector. We've got a non-compliance audit going on. We're writing to forest owners. If the member thinks that we're not doing enough, I think he's barking up the wrong tree.
Mr Speaker.
Order. Supplementary question, the Honourable David Cunliffe.
If the Prime Minister is so enamoured of an independent task force for forestry, why won't he enact the recommendations of the Royal Commission on Pike River, which required the families to be compensated while he washed his hands, including of the corporate obligations?
Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr Speaker, firstly, I don't believe that to be correct. Secondly, if one looks at the Pike River situation and the tragedy that was Pike River, the government has done a number of things. Firstly, it has and will continue to honour all of the ACC obligations to those families, with the current estimate being likely to be about $20 million. The government's also aware and has tried where it can to play a part in the individual trust funds that have been established, which total about $8 million for those families. Thirdly, I've had extensive conversations with those families, and the one moral issue they have actually raised with me is entry into the mine. The government had no legal responsibility to fund the re-entry into the mine, yet we've set aside between $7 and $10 million to do that, and we'll continue to potentially do more if required. Mr Speaker, it's a great tragedy, but it's also a great tragedy that that member's playing politics with it.
Point of order, Mr Speaker.
Order. Order. This is a point of order. Order. Point of order. Honourable David Cunliffe.
Mr Speaker, I just wish to say I take offence at being accused of playing politics with a matter of life and death on the Pike River miner's death.
Order.
And if the Prime Minister was so concerned...
Order. This is a debating chamber. People will throw political barbs one side to the other. To say that you're playing politics, a member's playing politics... Sorry? Well, I just don't think politicians can take offence at that, to be honest. This is a political debating chamber. If politicians weren't using political tactics, I fail to see why they'd be here. Question number... Sorry, point of order. The Honourable David Cunliffe.
Speaker, I seek leave for the Crimes Corporate Manslaughter Amendment Bill in the name of Andrew Little to be set down for first reading as Members' Order of the Day number 1.
Leave is sought for that particular course of action. Is there any objection? Yes. There is. Question number 5, Chris Ockenvale.